The member for Fredericton South and leader of his party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the Minister for his statement and for starting off expressing gratitude to the Ombudsman, Charles Murray. I think this is a good example, Mr. Speaker, of the tremendous value that our legislative officers provide to the people of this province in the case of the Ombudsman in responding to public complaints and concerns about those particular public services offered through the Restigouche Hospital. I think it was quite appropriate that the Minister brought in an expert in the management of mental health facilities in the person of George Weber to do an analysis and report back. And I appreciate that he's tabled that report in the legislature. One of the things that was clear, Mr. Speaker, from the Ombudsman investigation, and I expect from Mr. Weber as well, is the challenge that exists in hiring and retaining a sufficient number of well-qualified healthcare workers, particularly psychiatrists and nurses. So, Mr. Speaker, that has to do with, in part, wages. And we need to start thinking about how we compete more effectively on wages with our neighboring maritime provinces, because that is part of the problem. We need to be competitive on wages with our neighboring maritime provinces, specifically for those in the care profession, like nurses, like psychiatrists, and others who work in the care professions. And we haven't been. In fact, in the past, successive governments have talked about New Brunswick as a low-wage destination to attract corporations to our province. We've got to get out of that mentality, Mr. Speaker, and start paying people what they deserve and need to compete with the other maritime provinces. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I expect, as Mr. Murray had suggested, that we need to shrink the number of people there right now, and that those who could be discharged should be discharged. My concern remains, Mr. Speaker, that the adequate programs and facilities, particular programs, are not in place for those who can be discharged to care for them well, because we don't have the kind of comprehensive provincial system of providing mental health and addiction care that we need. It's lacking. There are serious gaps, and too many people are falling through those gaps. And the last thing we need is for someone to be discharged and fall through those gaps that exist in the current system. So there needs to be a full court press, Mr. Speaker, in the wake of this report to ensure that we have in place and put in place a comprehensive mental health and addiction care system in this province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.